We're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so talking about learner profiles. So this has come up quite a lot in conversation today already. The idea that as part of a sort of, I guess, a mechanism of shifting our assessment system towards a more expansive way of recognising breadth of student strengths and capabilities. And yeah, in the next half an hour, we're going to hear from sort of 3 organisations that are doing this in practice. So I think that's been a bit of a theme throughout the day. How do we sort of move from the sort of ideas about what the future of assessment could look like to some of the actual solutions that could be kind of practically trialled and tested in schools and colleges? Just to give a bit of background, well, we've got Mike Flanagan, who's the CEO of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, as one of our speakers. So they're one of the sort of biggest organisations in the US who are pioneering the development of new transcripts. And 2 schools that you've already heard from briefly in a previous panel talking about what they're practically doing in their respective settings. I might just show a couple of slides if that's okay first. So we've had quite a few, well, numerous sort of commissions and sort of reports and research sort of pointing to this as one potential future sort of direction of travel. These are just a sort of selection. The Times Education Commission, which we've heard about quite a bit today, recommended a digital learner profile as one potential sort of way forward and a solution. This is just a sort of an overview of the different sort of global networks that are sort of in this space talking about it and developing sort of new ways of sort of doing implementation. And at Rethinking Assessment, we last summer published, I guess, our draft framework for what we imagined a learner profile could include. So we'll share these sort of slides with you all after the session, but this sort of framework gives, I guess, a visualization of the sort of key, what we imagine could be the key components of a learner profile that includes sort of courses and qualifications of varying different types, that explicit recognition of strengths, dispositions, skills, capabilities, a sort of a section sort of on reflections of, you know, your learning journey and how you're progressing as a learner, as well as sort of personal projects, portfolios of beautiful work and things like that. And this visual and framework has really helped sort of catalyse both the conversation around learner profiles in the UK and the work that we're now doing at Rethinking Assessment to turn this sort of, I guess, high-level sort of theoretical framework into practical implementable tools and products. Over the next sort of year to 18 months, we're going to be building, I think, probably mainly in Google, free-to-use basic tools for schools, but there are numerous other sort of providers and platforms out there that offer more sort of, I guess, different sorts of functionality, and we're going to hear about 3 of those today. So I might, start with Mike, if that's okay. Brilliant, Mike. Can you see us, hear us? Wonderful.
Yes, I can. I thank you, everybody, for having me here virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, and as I was telling Rosie, once I saw the room that you're in, I was even more sorry. I'm used to presenting in very sterile conference halls. So just by way of introduction, my name is Mike Flanagan. I lead a nonprofit organization here in the States with some international members as well. That's called the Mastery Transcript Consortium. And the best way to understand Mastery Transcript is ironically not about the transcript or the school record at all. It's actually about the pedagogy and curriculum that our schools have in common. Simply put, they have a vision for secondary school education for the 21st, focused more on skills, what some researchers in the UK have called disciplinary transfer, both in university and workforce. And also recognizing that for many young people, that track will be pretty permeable. They'll go back and forth. And then the second piece is that from a curriculum perspective, our schools have a real emphasis on trying to create learning environments that are much more personalized and individuated. And if we do that, if we give students individual, kind of timelines to acquire and master skills, then what we've begun to realize is that a lot of what we think of as kind of the artifacts of traditional assessment, so-called grades, GPA, grade curves, are actually less a function of students' actual abilities and potential, and much more artifacts of expecting that they will all learn at identical rates. And I think we've all, those of us who have all taught, know the frustration of, hey, it's Tuesday, it's time to move on to Unit 2. regardless of whether all of our students have mastered the material. And so what we found is that if we can decouple the timeline from their mastery of that material, all of them can ultimately reach a very high potential. So when you put those two things together, and I also will borrow Rosie's phrase of a portfolio of beautiful work, what we have basically is a need for a different kind of artifact. So Rosie, I don't know if you wanted me to show what we built or whether we're going to do introductions first and demos later. It's up to you.
I would say straight into a demo would be great.
Wonderful. Okay, let's do this. I'll be brief.
And Mike, it would be great if you'd let us also talk a little bit about how this is being used for transitions into higher education. So practically within a system, how is it helping to change what is measured and valued?
Absolutely. So what I'm going to share with you, what you'll see on screen, it doesn't look like much. This is a pretty humble PDF. Rosie talked about how we interface with higher education, and at least here in the States, one of the kind of ironies is that, even as every aspect of our world is getting increasingly focused on technology and digital transfer of data, the college admissions process still very much relies on pictures of pieces of paper. There's PDFs of different forms and records and letters that all go from place to place. And humans are still very much in the loop, kind of reading and processing all of that. So what we send to everyone when they're applying to university is a simple PDF like this. What it has really is instructions to get to the real thing. And that real thing is an interactive digital record. This is actually called the MTC Learning Record, and it is essentially a streamlined or slimmed down version of the full mastery transcript, but it's more useful for demo purposes here today. Earlier, when you heard me talking about curriculum and pedagogy, I was talking about skills. So every learning record for us has an interactive digital visualization of a school or learning organization's competency model, and that really literally is the center of the interface. We don't expect folks who have worked with these, whether they're in university or workforce, to have seen them before. So we've really created a navigation structure that's meant to be explored in kind of a tactile way. If you don't see something or understand it, you can click on it. If you want more information about something that you think is interesting, you can click on that and we'll tell you what it is. But the structure of these, we weren't trying to kind of break new ground in terms of the organization. It's a simple taxonomy, right? We've got domains of the skill areas that we care about. We've got descriptors of the specific underlying competencies, and you've usually got some good kind of Bloom's taxonomy language about what students can do and demonstrated abilities. What we then were able to do it in a more opportunistic way is that if you've got this kind of digital kind of interactive space, then you can start actually including things you can't include on flat paper records, like actual evidence of the student's ability. So this is just a demo account, but our schools are really leaning very heavily into using evidence that doesn't actually happen inside school buildings at all. Evidence that's created in co-curricular environments, out of school time, even in kind of part-time work. We're deliberately trying to blur the line between what is and isn't a schooling environment. And most importantly, we're trying to help all learners get credit and make progress using learning activities that may not actually happen inside our building. With that said, the educators in our schools still remain the sole evaluators. Students can't award themselves credit. They can only nominate themselves and by sharing evidence of what they've done. So this is sort of kind of a version of the mastery transcript. The full mastery transcript, which I can also show you, it's just a lot more detailed because it's optimized for a 4-year university application, and it looks like this. It's got a lot more bells and whistles. Same underlying principle though. Competencies in the middle, evidence alongside. The other bells and whistles are having to do with different tiers of competencies and also including more traditional course lists. Some of our schools have moved beyond courses. They're completely based on individualized learning paths, but many of them still have traditional schedules and courses. So that's what we've built. I think what I would share with you is just, this is an early project. The organization is only 5 years old, but the transcript itself is only 3 years old. We are just starting on our 4th, what you would call admissions cycle. But already we've gotten 285 colleges and universities have accepted learners using our record, and they've used it as the sole academic record. And I suppose I'm kind of burying the lead here. None of our transcripts have grades or GPA or Carnegie units, credit hours on them. So for a university to accept a learner using our transcript, it means that that's the only academic record they use. It's not like they're backing it up with the courses and GPAs. It's the competencies and evidence. And we're excited too, because we're starting to move into some adjacent areas like out of school time environments. And also there's a whole kind of emerging energy here in the States for so-called learn and earn programs. These are programs where rather than forcing students to make a pretty high stakes choice between college or career before their frontal lobe is fully developed, we're giving them space to do more exploratory things where they can pursue sort of kind of career paths, earn some money, but also continue education, and then later go back into more of a credit-bearing higher education setting if that's what they want to do. So.
Great stuff, thank you. And that's really interesting to hear about sort of the kind of emerging energies around that sort of pick and mix experience before they're narrowing into sort of greater specification later, and how something like a transcript can help enable that sort of log of learning. That's another phrase we've heard a bit today as learners are trying out different paths. Brilliant. I might hold it there, and we're going to hear from the three speakers, then come to questions afterwards, if that's okay. In terms of demos, I might ask Gavin if that's okay to go next. So, yep, Gavin's from Golfton Primary School. They've integrated digital portfolios across their curriculum. And yeah, Gavin's going to show us their model.
Yeah, no problem. So, I work in a two-form entry primary school in North Wales, for those who weren't in the last session. And this is how we manage our pupils' e-portfolios. So, as part of the guidance from Welsh Government is they want pupils to own their own portfolio. They don't want it to be an in-school thing that we control and we manage, and that's how we've done it. So all of the pupils own their own portfolios, and what they do is they share a link to that portfolio back with me as the teacher who's led this programme. So you can see that was a passage from the assessment proposals, and that underlines why we created them. So if you click on class 5A, so this is my class, and as you can see, we've then got links to all of the pupils' portfolios there. So their names are the links, and they quite like the avatars on them as well. If I was doing it in secondary school, I would probably just have a spreadsheet with all their links on and their names next to it, which could quite easily be done through collecting that through a Google form or however you're managing pupils' responses. All of the pupils' portfolios are locked down to our school, to Wales's national domain, just out of security purposes more than anything, and helping them with understanding safeguarding. But you can click on mine. So mine is an example one that I fill in with them. So you can see that we've got several pages. The first one is the home page, and it's an all about them. It's a one-page profile for them, and we get them to talk about who they are. If you just scroll down, sorry. Talk about who they are, what makes them happy in life. It talks about who supports them, how they like to be supported. So for those pupils with additional learning needs, they're able to have input on this from their parents, have input on all the pupils. But any additional services that work with those pupils also make comment to them. On the next page, on the 4 purposes. So these are the 4 purposes of the Welsh curriculum. And it's the Welsh curriculum throughout the entirety of a learner's life in Wales. What we have done is we've rewritten them as a primary school in a little bit more child-friendly speak. So we've got the ambitious, capable learners, enterprising, creative contributors, but you can see that there's an array of different skills that are expected to be developed, or for pupils to have experience in developing while they're in school. So we've got that as part of our portfolio because that's what we ask our pupils to reference their learning against, so that when they are thinking about what they've done within the class context, how has that helped them become an ethical, informed citizen, a healthy, confident individual? We want them to understand that what they are doing in school is enabling these characteristics to be developed and experienced within them. So if you just click on year 5 at the top, so either one. So this is This is what the pupils will then see. So obviously when they're in year 3, they fill in the year 3 page for the 4. My year 5s will have a year 5 page. And when they are adding their work to it, what they're able to do is to give a brief synopsis of what that work is. But more than that, we ask them to reflect against that work. So why have they done that work? What have they learned doing it? What are the processes from, with the Guy Fawkes, what have they learnt about that historical event that has made them think about why we celebrate Bonfire Night? We also ask them then to reflect against what those 4 purposes are. So have they become a more ethically informed citizen by learning about how events in the past have shaped current situations and current celebrations? So by doing that, we're focusing our learners on understanding why they're doing those different things. As I said earlier, as pupils progress through the school, they get the choice of how they decide to show their understanding of a topic or whatever they've learned. So the knowledge they're getting, they're not able to create a Guy Fawkes presentation without having first learned all about Guy Fawkes and the implications of all the events that took place leading up to that. So it's about supporting them and enabling them to then be creative in how they demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of topics areas. We also have a page for achievements outside of school. I've obviously done nothing since becoming a teacher, but we ask our pupils to document achievements. It may be representing their local football team. It could be that they've achieved a music grade. It could be that they've achieved a swimming badge. It could be that they baked a cake with their parents. Anything that they're particularly proud of, we ask them to document those as well. And they're great activities that we can then set them during half-term breaks because they're able to access these at home as well and share what they've done with their parents. And we actually ask them that if they're adding to it at home on their portfolios, that they think about how that has supported their understanding of the 4 purposes and where those purposes fit into their development as a child. And then finally, we have digital badges. And again, I haven't achieved any, but our pupils will get certificates from RM Easy Maths. We do the Google Online Safety with the Internet Land, and they'll get all those certificates that they get awarded through those things. Now, rather than coming up to the teacher and asking us to print them all off in primary school, they then add them to their portfolio, but then they have to think about what did doing that help them to learn and understand. Now, if I was looking at this from a secondary setting, I'd be looking at how pupils are then going to be able to show their understanding and their learning of those different things. So things like PE, music, art, drama, they're all things that you would have lots of video evidence for, and this is somewhere that they're able to then put it on for a wider audience to be able to see. You know, they're able to keep a documentation of their achievements within a subject area. If we're looking at English, we still have it where our books are collected in and looked at, and we are moving away from it, but we're then missing the whole oracy aspect of the English curriculum. This is somewhere where we're able to show everything in one place.
Great, thank you. One of the things we're finding at Rethinking Assessment is the value of something like this at key points of transition. And I wonder if you might say something about, and I know it's way too early because you've only just started doing this in primary settings in Wales, but how you see a learner taking this with them into secondary and beyond. And obviously, Mike and the Mastery Transcript are doing this very effectively at post-secondary. Yeah, how do you imagine that working in Wales over time?
Well, in Wales, we're quite fortunate we have that hub platform. So if us as a primary school are using the Hub Cymru domain, if the secondary school is also doing that, those portfolios can transition with them. When they get up to secondary, all they will need to do is to add the pages that the secondary school decide are relevant. It could be that the secondary school decide, rather than organising it through year group, they want to have an English page, a Welsh, well, you won't have Welsh, but a maths, music, PE, whatever the subject areas are, and then they can have those sub-pages for year 7, year 8, year 9, and document their learning journey through that as well. The great thing about Google Sites is that it's entirely free, but it's also developing a pupil's understanding of how to create a website that can be personal to them, and the future of that. Now, our pupils are going from our primary school to Connors Quay High School, and they have a separate domain. So when they work with the Google tools, they're not going to follow on and carry on with our portfolios in the way they are. The pupils will still be able to access them because they will always be able to enter their Hub Cymru accounts. But the high school then will create their own template, and they will share that with the pupils for them to make a copy of their school's domain account.
Great, thank you very much. And then we've got Al, who's going to talk about what they're doing at King Alfred with the Story product. Do you want that on the screen now, Al?
If you...
Yes, great.
Oh, great, well done. So,
There it is.
yeah, so this is a platform that's been designed by someone called Priya Lakhani, who is a social entrepreneur, and she runs a learning platform called Century.tech that quite a lot of schools, particularly in the international schools community, use. It's an AI-driven platform that has got learning materials and teaching sort of gobbets in it, and that's a very successful product that her company has been running for a number of years. So we've been playing with that at my school and enjoying lots of elements of that as a kind of enrichment tool and as a revision tool. So that's the kind of context of this. Priya is also a member of the Rethinking Assessment Advisory Group, and so we've been talking to her about our ideal for a digital learner profile at the same time as she's been developing her own product, which is intended to be non-commercial. She intends this to be free for everyone to use. Whether she's there yet or not, I'm not totally sure. So we've begun to beta test this product essentially for her. She's not paying me, although I'll declare that she gave me some fudge for Christmas, which maybe with hindsight was a bribe. But there are a number of these products out there, and this mirrors quite closely what Rethinking Assessment thinks should have the things in it that a learner profile should have. So I don't know, this is very new, this website. It only became live yesterday. So this is where you could go and see more about the product that she is offering. Essentially, it's an app-based way of recording school experiences. She was very clear when she set this thing up that it had to be something that pupils would want to use. There had to be some fun element of it. So in some ways, it mirrors the things that kids like about social media. They can capture their experiences, they can share them, they can capture them as video, they can input text, and that builds up a record of things that they think are interesting about their learning experience. They can then sort of subcategorize them under various headings, and the record of evidence sort of shoots off under the various banners that someone else might later be interested in exploring about that young person. So the idea is that it's an ongoing learner record of the things that the school might ask pupils to upload, as well as things that the pupils think are interesting from within or from outside their school experience. So it enables people to bring in learning experiences from outside of school as well. And they can gather as much information as they want. They can tag it as, here's evidence of my communication skills, here's evidence of me doing some creative thinking. They can enable teachers to see that and validate it if it's something that they think they want to go forward to their kind of presentation of self. And the idea is that over time they're building up a rich and holistic record of things that they might like to showcase at some point. And the clever thing about it, I think, is that you can gather as much stuff as you want, and then at a point when you want to share it with some external body, whether that's UCAS or your parents at a parents' meeting, or an employer, you kind of pull the information into a particular moment that you want to share with employer X or university X, and it publishes that as a sort of an interactive PDF, and the person at the other end gets a unique code, and only they can see the kind of self-presentation that you would like to give them. So the notion is that, for example, this could be the thing that sits as a URL in your UCAS application. So currently you can add a URL to your UCAS application to submit further information. Not many people do. But it's interesting how quickly things move on, isn't it? UCAS are now saying that they want their self-presentation to be something a bit more interactive and not just a personal statement. And Priya's right in there with UCAS. I'm sure she'd like this to become something like this, to be what people in the end want to be the UCAS application. So our experience of it so far is limited because we've just started. I've got a group of pupils at school who have been given the kind of beta version of this, partly to test it for bugs, but partly to feed back on what it's like to upload information. They can upload their qualifications, they get validated by school. They can upload evidence of work experience, that gets validated by the work experience people. And they then categorize their experiences under dispositional things or under skills things, and they build a sort of convincing, interactive, multimedia CV, which is along the lines of what lots of people think is the key to unlocking the assessment problem. So when at Rethinking Assessment we were going through a sort of design thinking process. What's the ultimate blocker to schools doing more interesting stuff? Well, it's the kind of school leavers bag of things that they come out with and they go, this is what I've done, and it's just some grades, basically. So if you can kind of reverse engineer something that is much more holistic, and that's what you leave school with, you leave school with a rich picture of everything that you've done, then that provides a sort of positive incentive for schools to do those things and to make space for those things. So I can't comment on a huge amount of progress yet, but I think it's a really interesting proposition and one to watch.
Thanks, Al. And how have the students that you've been engaging in this process found it so far? What sort of feedback are you getting from them?
Yeah, so they've enjoyed using it. For them, it's always a sort of, there's a bit of carrot and there's a bit of stick. So that the line to them is that this will enhance their ability to apply to universities. So they're excited by that, and they've gone off and started gathering information. So I think they appear to regard it as a kind of unqualified good thing. What they don't yet know is how much this will really advantage them in their application. So there's some healthy skepticism there. So again, it goes back to what the university panel was saying earlier, really, which is that we need a united front. We need universities to say what we'd really like is a richer bank of evidence of what you've done, and various people who are making these products to pipe up and say, here's how you can do it. And then pupils will start to believe that it's worth their while doing this thing. Schools will start to believe that it's worth their while doing this thing. So it's part of a grassroots attempt to get ahead of the curve.
It is, and it's a mix of improving that experience of the day-to-day in schools, like you're doing with the reflective piece, Gavin, but also thinking about, well, at those key points of transition, how something like this a lever then for that broader systemic change, which we shall see.
I don't know was there any scrolling down that happened here? I didn't see, but I think there are some images of it in. There we go. So it's a kind of app-based, social media-esque way of capturing all that stuff.
Different bits.
A bit more below.
And so we're kind of collating a series of examples on our website. So by the sort of summertime, we will have had a sort of a kind of a research piece on around 20 different platforms that offer different forms of functionality. But we really like the work that sort of Gavin's doing with Google, for example, as a very kind of basic entry point if you want to start exploring something like this, and then potentially the option to move on to other sorts of products if you wish over time. I wonder if we might open up for questions, because I'm sure everyone's got thoughts on this for both Gavin, Alan, and Mike as well. Does anybody have anything they want to ask a question on? Claire?
Thank you. Having had sort of 10, 12 years of helping kids with personal statements, I'd say the biggest reason that a kid comes to me with a blank sheet is a real struggle to get over the total embarrassment of talking about themselves. And a sense, so firstly that, and then secondly, a lack of awareness about what they've done, which things count, what's important, and why anyone would care. And it's worth, so I was in charge of Oxbridge for a decade, and as in at my school, not in the world. I flatter myself. And I think so. It's actually some of our most, highest prior achievement kids who are struggling with this. Does the learner profile help, or does it just enable people who are already very aware of what they've done and what they can do to present what they've done? Does it suit a certain kind of person better than others?
Great, that's one to watch. Do we take a few more questions and then I will field them across the various panelists? Anybody else wants to chip in? Guy at the back? You can run, Fran.
Hi, I was wondering what you thought about whether it matters that no one is really validating what they're uploading to these digital profiles. So it's sort of, they're obviously, it's a good thing that they own it. It's about them. They're demonstrating what they think they can do. Does it matter that that they've got some evidence, they've uploaded some evidence that they can communicate, they can collaborate, but nobody's saying how well they can do that, or if they are, it's themselves saying, I do it well. So I suppose the parallel is to LinkedIn. So you can look on LinkedIn and see what someone claims about themselves, but there is some endorsement from other people around that. Do we need to develop that space of how we assess and grade, for want of a dirty word here, what they're claiming they can do?
Great question, and that's something we're very much actively exploring in the learner profile. What are the levels of accreditation or validation of learning that we need to give something like this currency and value? And I wonder, Mike, do you maybe want to respond from the perspective of how learning's validated within the Mastery Learning Record?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the right question. One way of reframing it to ask it is, what's the right balance? What's the right equilibrium point between agency and validity, right? So I think a model that's 100% focused on learner agency is completely owned by the learner. They have total autonomy over what's in it. And then on the other side, you have sort of single sitting high stakes assessments, right? Where what we've done is actually enforced a lot of very little kind of agency there. You show up when you're told, you take the test, but we've put all sorts of protocols in place to make sure that it's secure, right? And I think for us, we're trying very hard to find something that's somewhere in between, and we made a design choice that learners have total agency over what they submit for the transcript, but it's still an official school record. And so only learning organizations and educators can sort of officially authorize or award credit or allow evidence. And again, that's a design choice. And I think it actually goes back to the first question in a way. We really envision a model in which these records are not extracurricular exercises for learners to take on top of their already heavy course loads and academic workloads, but rather something that needs to be integrated into the actual practices of the school. Gavin, at the outset, when he was talking about his record, used a phrase that I liked quite a lot. It really resonated with the way our schools think about it, which is asking learners to reflect actively on, who supports them, what kinds of supports they need, how they'd like to be supported. We think of that as that's an explicit skill: metacognition, agency, self-advocacy. You have to teach that. If you don't teach it, then yes, the students that come in sort of with those tools already, you do run the risk of sort of widening gaps. But for us, that isn't sort of that is the point. We're leaning very hard into models where we do ask learners very deliberately to create things, to take on projects that they would want to showcase because they've built something of value. I often joke that you could create a mastery transcript where the only evidence is worksheets, but why would you want to do that? It seems you're leaving a lot of value there. So it's asking students to create, to reflect on what they've created with the adults in their life and in their school. And then most importantly, as Gavin said, use that reflection, to make a choice about what you do next. It's that loop for us that is the power of the model. The transcript is just an artifact. It results from it. So that's sort of how we think about it right now. But I'm not pretending at all that it's the only or best solution. It's just sort of how we've chosen to approach it.
Great, thank you. And Gavin, I wonder if you want to maybe speak to the piece about how different learners or how different pupils find building their profiles, particularly those who maybe aren't more, like naturally in tune to talking about themselves and what they do.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about the pupils going through that experience. It's not necessarily that the portfolio is something that is to be taken as this is as good as it's going to get. It's the pupils' experiences of going through that reflective process, of being able to think about what they've learned is massive. For them to be able to add videos that they've created, in year 4 and 5, we have pupils presenting the slides presentations that they've made using the flip, used to be Flipgrid. But they're now starting to perform, they're starting to speak, they'll take part with groups, they'll record themselves on a screencast showing what they've built in Minecraft. So without trying to break it down to the academic pupils will always perform better or produce something of a higher standard, it's now no longer necessarily the case. When we're looking at our portfolios in terms of assessment, I look at them in terms of assessing, has the teacher given the pupils the opportunity to be able to do what's expected for those pupils at that year. So if there's any accountability, it's on the staff, to allow the pupils the opportunity to be able to use the knowledge that they're learning in class and exhibit it in a creative way. We do give pupils the feedback on the work that they're doing, on the reflective process that they're making. But like anything, if they're not going to put the effort into it, and this is something that they're not mandatory within our school. If we had a child turn around and say, I don't want to have a digital portfolio, we wouldn't make them. But what we would do then is they would have a reflection book. And in that book, it would say, this was the piece of work, and they would have to reflect on their work in that book, because it's the reflection that is the learning, not necessarily how well have they reflected. Well, the reflection is theirs, and through continuous practice and through repetition of that practice, they're going to get better at it. They're going to become more self-aware of what their strengths are, what their weaknesses may be, and what do they need to do next to be able to improve those things.
Great, thanks, Kevin. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. I think Bill, and then, well, maybe 2, John as well, quickly. Maybe Bill first, then John, if that's okay. And it might be an observation or a question.
Thanks, Fran. You're running hard today. I just wanted to pick up. Hi, it's really good to see you, Mike. Last time we met each other, we were on Waterloo Station. This question of verification is the thing that's really vexing Australia, for example, where it's national policy. And they've taken a pretty hard line that it needs to be externally verified, and probably at more than the school, possibly even more than the state level. I'm not sure that's the right way. And I would just ask colleagues to think about contrasting pressures, levels of verification, levels of exemplification, because I think one of the things the Mastery Transcript Consortium shows is how you can actually take people to look at work and come to their own view about it, rather than just having a third-party description. And the third variable is, I think, levels of student engagement and self-understanding. All of those are deeply valuable. So if we just say, is it valid, I wonder whether we end up again into a rather binary rabbit hole. And the other point here is that I think we are in a multimodal world where we're not just taking one view on it. So we're constantly triangulating that. And isn't that what we have to do and grow up and do in social media land? So I think, there's a parallel world here about education for the users of this to understand that it will take just a few moments. It's not just a level 3B, and therefore we need to work at that, but it might be worth it.
Great, thanks, Bill. Have we got time for one more question? Ollie's like, maybe not. Briefly, if it's an observation, John, perhaps.
Thank you. Brilliant, really exciting. Just something in my mind, probably not time to frame it as a question, I guess. One of the issues I felt with going all the way back to the National Record of Achievement was that it could become a sort of catalogue of compound advantage for children who had the financial, the social, the parental support circumstances to be able to do lots and lots of extracurricular or added value activities. How do we structure these new platforms in such a way that they're not opening the floodgates to that they are, I suppose, a conduit to all children to doing a broader array of things rather than a way of advantaging children that already have that opportunity?
Great question, and possibly the one for us to leave on, in that this is something we're going to be exploring a lot through our pilots and trials, and the equity piece is absolutely at the forefront of our mind, and we're starting to gather examples of how we are broadening those opportunities and not, like you say, advantaging those already advantaged. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to our panellists, and thank you so much, Mike, from joining us from the US to be part of the panel today. Thank you all. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Great.